books, and now consults into trusts and boards in the educational and charitable space. Meg will share her story with you this morning, as will our final speaker, who's William van der Riet. He's a second generation owner of Cathedral Peak Hotel. This four-star leisure resort was established in 1939 in the Drakensberg Mountains. The hotel employs 200 staff. It's got over 81 years experience in the hospitality industry, and Cathedral Peak has become known as the premier resort in the Berg. You will all have seen some of William's social media posts going viral this week. Our discussion this morning is going to be focused on providing you with an update on Insurance Claims Africa's process in acting for these businesses, but also provide you an insight into the impact that the pandemic is having on this sector and explain why it's essential for that insurers honor these customers' claims. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and is on the record. So if you need a copy of the recording, please let myself know, or Danny Cohen, who's my business partner and also on the call, and we'll send you a copy immediately after. The format today will be informal. After our four panelists speak, we'll open the floor for questions. So please raise your hand if you have a question, or you can type it into the chat box as well. If you need an interview with any of our speakers, please let us know and we can arrange that for you this morning. We'll also add into the chat box a copy of a fact sheet just explaining the matter in a little bit more detail. So without further delay, let me hand you over to Ryan Woolley, who's the CEO of Insurance Claims Africa. Go ahead, Ryan.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sandra, for the introduction. Yes, I'm sure I've spoken to most of you, and I'm sure most of you have followed the matter quite closely as it's unfolded. Just a bit of background. Insurance Claims Africa, we are representing just over 500 claimants who have got, in our view, valid claims against their policies with many of the major insurance companies, from Santam to Bright to Guardrisk to Hollard to Old Mutual Insure, and so on. Our view is that these claims are being unfairly rejected and curtailed by the insurers, despite efforts by the FSCA, as well as many other instances which have broken around the world. And in South Africa, Outsurance coming out and agreeing to meet all their claimants' claims. So a bit of background into business interruption. And business interruption insurance is specific insurance that a business will buy to help them cover their costs, running costs, their salaries and wages, their water and lights, and any other running costs that they have in order to survive following an insured event. Normally it would be a fire, a flood, a storm, a hurricane, etc. What the insurers did is, and these specific insurers, is that they developed a boutique product, a specific product that for the hospitality and tourism industry that would then give wider cover. And they said, you know, we understand the hospitality and tourism space. We know that you've got other events which might affect your business. So why don't you place your business with us for a certain premium, and we will happily cover you for these additional risks. And those additional risks go from murder, suicide, to a shark attack, to a lion attack, or in this case, the outbreak or occurrence of an infectious, contagious, notifiable disease. Now, what we're seeing with the insurers is that they are still holding firm to their stance, that they believe that even though they chose to insure a notifiable disease, which is one that has to be notified to the government and is serious enough for there to have contemplated quarantines and restrictions, they've chosen that any losses that occur for these claimants post the 26th of March, when the government instituted a national lockdown, those claims fall away. So in other words, you will not be paid for any losses suffered beyond the 26th of March. The insurers are holding firm with that view. Their view is that the lockdown is a new intervening cause, and we've seen various defenses that have been raised by the insurers. One obviously being that pandemics are not an insurable event, And if they had to insure that, they couldn't afford to pay it and the premiums would be crazy. Well, we don't agree with that. There's various ways that they could have underwritten that risk. They could have provided limits, which many of these policies do have, either a rand value limit or in fact limited their claims to a 3-month period. So we find that that argument doesn't hold water. They also, in their policy wordings, have never excluded a pandemic, which we've just seen in the recent AXA case in France, where they've said that if you haven't excluded it specifically, well, then it's included. And we expect the courts in South Africa to side with that view. Pandemics have been around, for the last 10 to 12 years in terms of SARS, MERS, Ebola. Even in fact, I think in 2015, Bill Gates mentioned it publicly that a pandemic of this respiratory nature was definitely one that was going to happen. We've got insurers in South Africa that have decided to specifically exclude pandemics or epidemics. And we've got hold of those wordings, and we can see that those have been around for the last 2 years. So for these insurers now to use this as a defense, we feel is just disingenuous. We then go to their next point, and they keep on referring to the fact that if you have a positive case of COVID, yes, they will pay your claim. However, they're only going to pay it up until lockdown is instituted, because they believe lockdown is a separate intervening cause and has got nothing to do with COVID. And the policy therefore doesn't respond. Well, the policy wordings are very simply worded, very basic, that say all losses in consequence or due to an infection outbreak or an occurrence of an infectious contagious disease is covered. And in our view, there is no exclusion for this, so it must be included. And I think we've raised the example before. It's kind of like saying, well, you have a fire, the fire department comes in and douses the flames and causes water damage. We've never experienced an insurer trying to differentiate between the damage caused in extinguishing the fire and the fire itself. It's a continuous chain, a causal chain of events that it just doesn't make any sense to us. And we think that these arguments that they're putting forward don't have any sustainability at law. However, we are sympathetic to the position with insurers. We know that these clauses and extensions didn't have any sort of underwriting done with them, and no financial calculations or actuarial analysis to see what their potential exposure was. So we understand that these claims, if payable, may have the ability to devastate the insurers. With that, all of our claimants, we've managed very carefully, and I think that that's one of the advantages that we've had is with our team of accountants, we've quantified these losses quite carefully, and we've gone to the various insurers to put forward what we believe the claim values are. We've then gone and said, we understand that you probably can't afford to pay these at full value. So let's, instead of going through a long, hard, arduous path where only the lawyers benefit in fees, let's try and find a compromise, a workable solution that we could try and move forward with, that would leave everybody, leaving something on the table, but at the same time give everybody the ability to survive. Now, we walked a very long road with Santam, and we will continue to discuss it with all the insurers. We've got in discussions with Hollard at the moment, waiting for meeting dates with Guard Risk and so on, where we will continue to engage with them as part of our strategy to fine-tune the numbers and the analysis, because we still believe that even if the court process unfolds, and even if it comes out in favor of the claimant, we're definitely going to be in the position where they may not be able to afford the full value of these claims. Obviously, that is a discussion to be had at that time, and maybe that avoids the appeal situation, but it's definitely something that we have to be practical with, and we have to move forward. We have to be in constant engagement with them. Santam have agreed to accelerated process in terms of the litigation. They've said that they would like legal certainty. We believe that's because of the pressure that's been put on them by their reinsurers. We think that we need to see the local insurers taking the fight to their reinsurers. We're tired of them, not looking after our policyholders' best interests. We think that they should be looking to try and find a way to settle the claims with the policyholder, and then taking the fight to the reinsurer. And if succeeding against the reinsurer, we can then go ahead and share in the rewards of that. So we believe that the reinsurers are definitely holding the insurers to ransom to a degree, and we think that the insurers need to definitely take on the reinsurers from that perspective. We've engaged with the FSCA. We've noted all the circulars that they've issued. We've had meetings with them as well. We will be making a submission on behalf of policyholders to them, setting out our points. We do believe that even the circular that they sent out, where they said to insurers that there was a certain way in which they expected these claims to be handled, the insurers, from what we understand, have all not formally appealed the process, but made written representations to the insurers using all their lawyers and senior counsel, etc. So we will be doing the same just to make sure that the policyholder side is heard. And we do believe that there are certain other brokers that are doing the same. So in hope that the FSCA will again abide by their circular that they sent out and the directive that they said that they would enforce if the insurers did not toe the line. We'll continue to engage with them and hope that they take a firm stance with the insurers. In terms of where we see ourselves with the litigation with the various insurers, we are definitely instituting action against Santam and HRC and considering the same against several of the other insurers. We will be bringing applications. We would hope that they would be heard on an urgent basis, and if not, we hope that the insurers will follow Santam's lead in that Santam have agreed not to try and delay and to try and find legal certainty as quickly as possible. The difficulties we've got is that, the insurer's view of what is fast and what is quick and time is not the same as our insurers. So with Santam, the earliest date that there is the 1st of September, and we are looking to join the matter in Cape Courts. We will then be looking, obviously, against HRC in Johannesburg or Pretoria, and we are still in discussions with various other claims groups to try and see if there is merit in a form of class action. So with that backdrop, it says, well, where to from here, and how does RCA believe that we can continue to break the deadlock? The FCA in the UK, through an affiliated company, Pragmaticum, that we have, we will be getting inside status checks as well as understanding how that case in the UK is breaking. We believe that that will impact a lot of the reinsurers and will impact on how the courts see it here, even though we don't follow the precedent directly. With that in mind, that is due to break by the end of August, and which will time quite well with our litigation. And we hope that then we'll be able to get back around the table with the insurers and start discussing a realistic settlement of settlement proposal to these claims. We just implore the boards of these companies, of these insurers, to actually take a long, hard look at themselves and decide, are they acting in the best interests of the policy holder and of the country? And should they be doing more? Should they be taking on their reinsurers harder, who are foreign entities, whilst our country and this hospitality and tourism sector continues to have devastating losses? And I think that that's a good background and update into the matter.
Thank you, Ryan. Chifiwa, if you'll provide us just with a backdrop of what is the impact on the tourism industry, and what would you like to see as the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, what would you like to see happen? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra, and good morning to everyone. For us as the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, if you look at the entire tourism value chain, it has been decimated. We are approaching, if I'm not mistaken, today is day 97 of lockdown. So we'll get into day 100 very soon, and we haven't been working. If we have worked, it's not even 5% of what we what we did, and it was selective properties that were working, for essential or quarantine services. Even though business travel is open, it is a very small part of travel at the moment because there isn't much demand, and hence we try to get leisure travel open. So far, and I've said this in the past, we have lost more than 68 billion rand. I must say that when I did my calculations, it's probably now around 72 billion rand. Because for each day that we don't operate, we lose around 748 million rand. And the devastation goes, to, as I've said, the entire value chain. You look at restaurants, how they're closing down. You look at lodges, safari lodges. You look at hotels. You look at bed and breakfast. And majority of these businesses have taken up these insurance premiums really to protect themselves so that they can be assured that if anything of this nature happens, they are able to operate and they are able to pay their employees. Now, what is happening now with these insurance companies that are refusing to come on board, it's nothing but spitting on the faces of these companies that have been, paying these premiums for many, many years, and without fail. And now comes time to put in claims. This is when, people want to say, but there's a lockdown, there's pandemic, two different things. I think that's, disingenuous. And I think it's wasting because businesses are falling. It wastes time because every day, like I said, when we don't operate, people are making decisions about closing. This impacts the loss of jobs and so forth and so on. So that is a big problem. And when we say we decimated, it's because of the pandemic. Lockdown didn't come in itself. It's here because of the pandemic. They're all interlinked. It's one in the same as far as we see it. So we believe that this insurance company must come on board. They must stop wasting our time. We have been paying our premiums, and we've been doing so, on time. And it's time for them to show up, not to come up with excuses all the time. The way they're acting is very insensitive. And it's insensitive not only to the business owners, it's insensitive to the people that work for those businesses, because they are the ones that generate this income for these businesses, and therefore they should also be protected. It's unfair, it's insensitive, and they're acting like they're some sort of a schemes, that sort of a, collect money and don't want to pay. One can think it's like a pyramid scheme. That's just an act of collecting money with no intention of paying it out to those that have been paying all the time. So for us as a tourism industry, including everyone within the value chain, hospitality, including the travel side of things, including, the attractions and many other businesses that are interlinked to tourism, value chain, we're quite disappointed at these insurance companies. Worst of it all, some of these companies are investors in some of the businesses that operate in this space. So they need to come to the table. It's time to pay up. And it's time to do the right thing from the insurance company and stop wasting our time and stop beating behind the bush and going on and on about let's go to court and so forth and so on. That just delays time. By the time we go to court, by the time we finish, businesses would have fallen, people will be on the streets without jobs. We're adding into unemployment unnecessarily. They must come on board, they must negotiate if there's a room to negotiate, they must pay what's due to the people that have been paying this claims. And I think it's a matter that, for us, many of the companies, will be heading to court on this matter. But it's not what we desire. We desire quick and fair settlement that will make sure that our businesses continue. Otherwise, it's unfair. Otherwise, it's acting borderline thuggish in terms of just collecting the money and putting in their own pockets. It's time to pay up. Thank you.
Comments.
Thank you very much, Chief. I mean, it's very clear the devastation that is being caused in the tourism industry, not only on these businesses, but on the jobs that they sustain. And one of the questions that I would certainly want to know is what are the board chairs and the shareholders of these companies, how far are they seized with this matter? So thank you very much for that. Next, we're going to hand over to two of our affected parties. The first is Meg Farger of Budmarsh Lodge. Meg, go ahead.
Thanks, Sandra, and good morning, everyone. Just for the sake of brevity, I'll give you a little bit of background to how Budmarsh came into being. It was a farmhouse on a plot of land in Cathedral, and in the early 2000s, Ken and I decided that we wanted to build into South Africa, and we turned the little farmhouse into a 5-star boutique hotel and conference center. And you could say that that's our hubris, and in hindsight it probably was, that we thought we could do this. Certainly didn't have loads of money to pour into something. It was something that we wanted to do and chose to do, and we loved the Magaliesburg area. I think everybody knows that it's really a beautiful part of South Africa. It's the cradle of humankind. It's got multiple biospheres in a small area. It's a very special place, lots of endemic plants and so on. So we started very small with our little hotel. There are lots of other hotels in the area, 7 or 8. We already know that one very iconic hotel has had to close, Mount Grace, which is terribly sad. That number of staff have lost their jobs, and you know that they all come from the local area. So we employ 30 staff from the local area as waiters, chefs, they do all sorts of things and help Budmarsh to be a special little place. Just by way of example, one of our employees is a man who's been with us for many years. He runs the estate. He looks after 5 grandchildren. And I just don't know how he's going to continue. Soon tours is going to stop. He does this really amazing job at our hotel, but he also does an amazing job of looking after his grandchildren. And I just see the spectre of malnutrition and the spectre of destitution lurking very, very close. And it makes me very, very sad. I think in addition to the staff that we employ, we use the services of a number of small businesses in the area to supply things typical to running a hotel. And obviously when our business was interrupted by the outbreak of disease, there was no income and you still have overheads, and this was hugely problematic. And I'd like to segue here and talk about why we even bought this business interruption insurance, very specifically around disease. At the time, I was running a school and SARS broke out, and it became very apparent to us that this could affect the boarding institution of the school, and disease became a reality. Just before that, many of you might remember Marilyn Lahana succumbing to Ebola in Morningside Clinic. You know, diseases, it was a very real thing, and it had been made very real to me in my job. And that's why one of the reasons we bought this insurance in the first place. And we really, when lockdown happened because of the outbreak of the virus, we immediately set to asking our brokers to get that insurance, and we were met quite positively in the beginning, saying, yes, you are covered, but they reneged on all that. So you can imagine now we've got these small suppliers in the area, and we have to pay them. Ironically, we also have to pay our insurance company their premiums, because if we don't have security on the property, then we won't, there'll be another reason for them not to pay us if there's a burglary or something like that at the hotel. So the reason I talk about these small suppliers is they too employ people in the area. And I'd like to give the example of 2, because COVID has taught me many lessons, many hard lessons. But one of the lessons it's taught me is that, and I'm generalizing, I understand that those who have the least are giving the most in this crisis. And how we show up in this crisis is going to be very telling at the end of it. And one of our suppliers is a little laundry service. We they do our laundry for us. And, well, as I said, we ran into trouble. Our Santam reneged on paying our business interruption. And this little company doesn't boast their values on television or pay huge advertising, came to us and said, you know what, we've got one good contract, pay us when you can. This tiny little company, struggling itself to survive, but also thankfully employing some people in the area. Another example is our security company. Now we have to have a security guard because that's what Santam demands of us for our you know, in case we get burgled or robbed. They came to us and said, you know what, we know it's tough. We know your income has dried up. We know that you're using your personal savings to keep this afloat at the moment. Just pay us our overheads, just so that we can keep a guard on your property. The very basic salary for the guard. Don't worry, we'll cope with the rest. So here you've got small companies reaching out at this time of crisis, and I really think that is amazing that they let us pay just to cover their basic costs, and that sort of brings into stark contrast how the insurance companies are behaving. Where are their real humane values at this time? I cannot believe that the board chairman, some of whom ironically are in charge of big funds that are supposed to help people, how can these shareholders actually allow this to happen? Because surely the way you do business says so much about you. Surely that is your best advert going forward. And I really have to say, I don't know how we're going to cope, because business interruption insurance is meant to be paid out quickly. It's an exigent matter. And for 5 weeks, they gave us the runaround. Then they reneged on the issue. How am I going to pay my staff? How are these people going to survive? How are they going to feed their children? I feel terrible when I get a phone call from staff members to say, please help. It's just devastating. And I think it's terrible. What does Santam want us to do? Should we ask our staff when they want money that they desperately need? Should they go to Santam directly? Should they go to the doors of Santam and ask them and say, you know, pay the business interruption insurance, because that actually saves my job? And I think it makes a nonsense of all these programs set out by corporates like the Youth Employment Services, where we were, you know, encouraged to try and create jobs. And here, big companies are simply decimating jobs. I feel sick to the core about how we go forward. I don't know how to go forward, and anybody is welcome to give me advice on how to do that with integrity, and to look after the jobs, to actually honor the dream that we had to provide jobs in the area. So it's been a devastating time. It's killed the joy of something that was set up hopefully to do good. And I'm desperate for poor people who have given their best to our little hotel, but there's nothing left. And I think Santam has a lot to answer for. Any good ideas are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, the devastation is just absolutely very clear. You know, we saw a statistic yesterday that said that for every one employee that's working in a community, specifically in community hospitality sector, they support a further 10 people within the community. So the devastation is very fast spread, and certainly there is a chain reaction to this matter. William,
Hello.
we're going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. So William is the owner of Cathedral Peak Hotel, just as a reminder to everybody. Go ahead, William.
Hi, morning everyone. We have a similar story to our previous speaker, Meg, and obviously Ryan gave us a good background of this whole situation that we're in. We took to social media at the end of last week because we were not getting any decent feedback from the insurers. And we had been strung along from pillar to post for the last 3 months. We've been asked for information. We've supplied information. They take a couple of weeks, they come back again, they ask for more information, which you supply them. And this has been going on for 3 months. And at the end of the day, they are not paying, and they are looking for every which way not to pay. This has been absolutely devastating for our business. You know, I just ask myself, what does the word insurance mean? And in my mind, that's to put funds aside for a rainy day when things don't go well and you need a backup. And this is what's happened. We've got into the situation with the COVID virus that no one expected, or no one saw the impact that this was going to have. So we turned to our professional insurers and said, well, we've been paying this money for all these years for just this type of situation. And here they've slammed the door in our face. We have, as I said, we took to public media. We have had well over 1,000 comments from all over the world, from not only South Africa, from the UK, from Sweden, from Australia. And we've had, I think, in the region of 400,000 reaches on our post. Every single one of those has been in support. Not one person has come forward and said, you're barking up the wrong tree. This is not what this is all about. Everyone has similar stories. But besides this, the devastation on the business, it is the human factor. It's not just the bottom line, the money. And I'll get back to that. The tourist industry in South Africa directly employs almost 750,000 people. There are hundreds of thousands of people that benefit from the tourism trade indirectly. And here we've had the rug pulled out from underneath us. We've relied on our insurers to see us through this time, and they have not done so. And what we see is that big corporates are more interested in their bottom line. They're just worried about their profit margin and what this is going to do to them. They don't seem to have any consideration for the tens of thousands of people that are going to become jobless and go hungry. Our personal story is that we employ 200 people in the hotel, and we know that these people support countless thousands more of their family from in our local area. And we don't know what we're going to tell these guys. What do you say when there's no more money? They don't understand. And here's where we need our insurers or the government to step in and see us through this time. The insurers are big corporate companies. They have funds. Why should they not feel the pain in this situation? They're kind of saying, well, you guys must feel the pain. It's your problem. But they're the big corporates. We rely on them. And they cannot pay lip service to employment and job creation and sustainability. And then when this situation arises, they simply are not in a position to pay what they due. And I just urge these insurers to do the right thing. And I urge the press. It's public knowledge who these people are. Our particular insurers are HRC backed by Guardrisk. It's public knowledge who the directors and who the shareholders are. And I ask the press to expose these people, shine the light on them to what their true characters are, because this is where they should be standing up. If we treated our clients in this disrespectful manner, we would not have a business. We would not have survived 81 years, and we would have no business going forward. It's atrocious that they can treat their clients in this way. And I would also like to ask the insurers why they've taken this approach. Why did they not take a proactive approach and come to the industry and say, this is what we're going to help you guys out. This is how we're going to help you. You are clients. You're in crisis. This is what we're going to do. How are we going to come to the party? And that is what I feel they should be doing. And it's just devastating that we're in this situation. We, as I said, we employ 200 staff, but we also support our local community. We feed and help our creches. We have in the region of 135 children in our area that we help at the local creches. We donate in the region of 20 to 30,000 rand a month in food and other aid, and we distribute clothes and what have you to our community. Now this is it's all stopped, it's all dried up. And I hope these insurers sleep well at night knowing that there are people in many, not just us, in many, many rural areas that are going to go to bed hungry and cold because of their attitude towards money. And it's a human thing. It's not just about cash. We ask the insurers, please, to step up, take your responsibility, and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. Thanks for sharing your story. Both yours and Meg's stories are both brave, but important to hear because it provides us with a real view of the impact that the insurer's decision to renege on their promise to their customers and their clients have on your businesses. Your stories, of course, are also mirrored by the many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands of businesses in the sector that are facing a similar crisis at the moment. So I think this is not only an ethical matter of doing the right thing, but it's also a commercial matter. We would have seen last week that Insurers came out and said that they would honor their clients' business interruption claims, that specifically for customers who had the extensions for notifiable infectious diseases. So I have no doubt that that commercially it'll take a knock. We've already seen across social media where people are saying that they would move to a competitor as soon as this matter is resolved. Okay, so thank you all very much for your time this morning. We're going to turn the floor over to our friends in the media who have already posted a couple of questions. I see a hand up from Emma Rumney from Jeune Africa, the Africa Report. Emma, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi guys, thanks everyone very much for doing the call this morning. I'm actually from Reuters, by the way. No problem. I have a couple of questions though. The first two are for Ryan. You mentioned that you have a quantum for the claims of the 500 businesses you represent. I was wondering if you could give that figure. And secondly, you mentioned that you're speaking with other claims groups about a class action. Could you say who those claims groups are? And then the rest of my questions are for Meg and William. I wonder if you could give a little bit more detail on exactly how serious the situation is for your businesses. You know, how close to closure are you, or to having to cut staff? And then secondly, if you could say a little bit about the emotional toll this has taken on you as individuals, and also just outline, if you haven't already, exactly which insurers you have your policies with and how long you've had those policies. Thank you very much.
Just to jump in there first, thank you, Emma. The claim quantum for our 500 clients is approximately between 3.5 to 4 billion. So that's where it currently sits, and that's what's essentially being, withheld from the tourism sector. When we look at, sorry, the other part of your question, Emma.
The other part was that you mentioned there were other claims groups that you were speaking with about a class action.
The other claims, yes, the other claims groups that we've chatted to, there's an attorney firm called Weaven and Weavend that have got 100 odd clients. There's also Professor Birgit Kuschka from the University of Pretoria that is affiliated with a firm in Pretoria that we're also waiting to chat to them. And then there are a few others like RMB attorneys in Durban who have collated and got together certain claims groups. One of the things that we put to the insurers was, at what percentage point of your claimants will you then consider a deal? If you're not willing to consider it for our 500, or in Santam's case I think it was 200 odd, we said, well, at what percentage point? We can corral these other claims groups, we can go and chat to them, and we can get to a situation where we can do a deal. you know, as Chafiwe said, you know, it's urgent. You know, we've got clients that are going to be closing their doors imminently if they don't receive funds, and the insurers unfortunately have the ability, you know, to kick the can down the road if they want to. Certain have said yes, they'll get into court urgently, but it's just not soon enough for us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Meg, William, do you want to take the question? Do you want to take Emma's second question around the emotional toll that this has taken on you?
Okay.
Yeah, I will. Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, all right. Thanks, William. That's very gracious of you. Typical of your beautiful hotel that I've spent many happy days at. Emma, we have been with Santam since 2011. We've been insured for all 18 years of the hotel's existence, but we moved to Santam largely because we thought that they weren't a fly-by-night company. We rather foolishly believed their advertising. We thought we would go with a big name brand, and look where we stand now. So I think that is you know, why we ended up with Santam. So for a number of years. How serious is the situation? The situation is very, very serious. Actually, I feel sick to the core. We have no cash. There is no income. So there is no cash in the business. We have creditors. We owe 600,000 Rand in creditors. Eskom is threatening to cut off our electricity. So my general manager, who stays in the place, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know what happens to the food in the freezer. It's just, how do you keep lights on? So we have overheads every month and no income. So that is the physical pain. The emotional pain is that my husband and I started this as a dream. We didn't start it to make money. We did it stupidly for altruistic purposes. And I do understand that it has given us great joy and great insight into a whole lot of things. And it has had wonderful rewards. But we don't take a salary from it. It's like watching a child just slip out of your hands. So the emotional side is huge. And then the thought of, how do we tell our staff? What do we say to our staff? There is no money. And I think William said it so well, there isn't an understanding of what no money means. We've already, just to keep the, you know, the lights on, as it were, we've had to go into personal savings for that. So it's just devastating. It's like taking memories and throwing them out, and then these people that you feel responsible to and responsible for, knowing that you've actually done the right thing, that you know, you've taken out insurance against these things. I've always been aware that there's been a pandemic, and I know actuarially people have always said, or I know this is anecdotal, but the actuaries I've spoken to over the years say, well, actuarially, you always plan for a pandemic every 30 years. So I don't know why this wasn't, you know, understood by the insurers, who are far more intelligent than I am. I'm just an English teacher. And I think that there should be, I don't know, it's just the sense of being so let down, and having the criticisms about South Africa, you know, thrown into absolute relief. You know, we're talking about CEOs who earn 10,000 times more than my workers. 10,000 times. One person earns 10,000 times more than one of my staff, and I must tell them that there is no money. We're going to have to close down. It's just terribly sad, Emma. I think that's the emotional cost. Absolute sadness. The dream of South Africa actually fizzling up, and COVID causing, you know, scoring a goal against humanity, and an absolute, you know, horror at how callous some people can be. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much for that, Meg. Thanks for your honesty. I appreciate it.
William, I know that you wanted to come in too.
Yes, indeed. The emotional toll has been extremely heavy. I took over this business from my father, who built the hotel up from scratch. There was absolutely nothing there. I've been there over 40 years now, and my son is now working for me with his wife, and they are hopefully going to be the third generation. And besides the legacy side, we've employed at the moment 200 staff. In the past, we've employed over 300 when tourism was better. So one has this enormous responsibility, and the tragedy that such a dream could come to an end. And on the financial side, things are dire. As Meg said, we have enormous overheads. Our overheads are in the region of 800,000 to £1 million a month, because as Meg said, we've got to pay security, we have to pay the policies that still go on, the UIFs, the medical aids, all these policies still carry on. Although we did get holidays on some of them, they're kicking back in again, and we still don't have any income, and we don't know when we're going to have income. So the future is extremely worrying. So it's an enormous toll mentally. We lie awake at night wondering where the next lot of money is going to come from. I've put my personal money into the business, but we're sitting with a massive, we owe in the region of 7 to 8 million at this stage, and we've maxed out our credit. And we can probably survive for another month, 6 weeks. And then I honestly cannot say where to from here. So unless we get help, we're in serious trouble, like a lot of people in the hospitality industry. So I hope that gives a perspective to the question.
It does. Thanks very much again to you, Ken. To William, sorry.
Thanks, William. We've got a question from Londiwe Buthelezi from Fin24. Go ahead and ask your question, Londiwe.
Thanks, Sandra. I just want to get clarity first on HCI. Are we talking about whole lot commercial insurance? And in terms of you joining the Santam case in September, will you be joining as an interested party, or are you going to have a separate case? And with the other insurers that you say you are contemplating on also pursuing the legal route with, when more or less do you intend to actually file your court documents? When do you intend, for instance, HCI to approach them with your affidavit? And the last thing is just on the possibility of the class action. I just wanted to understand how feasible that would be in the case, in your case, because the last time I spoke to a lawyer about this, they said that it might need that each and every person files their case individually. But I mean, if you're proposing a class action, it means that there is a possibility of going that route. So maybe if you can just elaborate on that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Londiwe. It's not HCI, it's HRC, which is an underwriting agency supported and backed by Guard Risk, which is in turn owned by Momentum or MMI Holdings. So HCI, Hollard, is one of the other insurers as well. But HRC is the one that we talk about. The action against all of them, we had a meeting as recent as this morning with our senior counsel, and joining the matter does require a similar set of facts. It does require that the plaintiff is happy for us to and won't be raising any objections just joining, which we understand they won't. But obviously Santam could still object, and that could delay proceedings, but we hope that they will stand true to their word and not and try and get legal certainty as quickly as possible. So we are hopeful. We've pushed the button on that, and that should be happening this week. The applications against the other insurers should be kicking off. We've instructed our counsel and attorneys to proceed, and it's as soon as they can get it drafted and filed. So we're hopeful for, towards next week is probably more realistic than the end of this week, but it is on a as soon as possible basis. The difficulty is urgency, and the urgent courts are, don't really deal with matters where they're going to set precedent, and they are more for putting out fires than actually dealing with policy interpretation and setting precedent. So our only hope is that we can find a mechanism which the insurers are happy with, that we can facilitate a quick legal process. The prospects of a class action, we're uncertain on this, and Professor Birgit Kuschke is definitely taking the lead in terms of developing whether there is a class. The view is potentially it could be, because the FSCA has created a class of policyholders that have got this contingent business interruption cover. And that would be the basis of the class as it's currently been put to us. That is not the basis on which we are moving forward, but we're willing to explore all avenues.
Thanks, Ryan. There's a question from Suren Naidu. Suren, is your line okay now? No, maybe not.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Go ahead, Suren.
Thanks, Ryan and Sandra. Ryan, the 3.5 to 4 billion rand, is it for only that 1 week or so before the lockdown? Because the FSCA also, to some extent, is protecting the financial services industry by, they didn't come out and say it, but essentially they kind of agree with the insurers that the lockdown is not covered, from what I understand. I could be wrong. And I think
no, we don't agree with that, Suren. I think that the interpretation there needs to be quite clear. What they're saying is that the lockdown can't be the trigger for the policy. So they're saying that you can still have a valid claim where you have a positive COVID case within your radius or at your premises, proven on a reasonable basis, and then from there you are entitled to full cover in terms of the policy. So for the full 3-month period that you're insured, or 4 months, whatever, including the lockdown. What they say, and we don't quite agree with them, and we are making representations to the FSCA with the help of our senior counsel to put forward our position, or the policyholders' position, that the declaration of state of national disaster potentially does trigger the policy. So we don't quite agree with the FSCA on the lockdown being a trigger, but we do agree with the interpretation that you are entitled to a full claim if you are able to prove that you have a positive case of COVID within your radius at the premises. The 3.5 to 4 billion represents the total value of the claims for the full indemnity periods. So we definitely think that the insurers could afford to pay these claims, and we have offered them a compromise. And it was a realistic compromise of approximately 50 to 60%, some going as low down as 40%, depending on savings and other aspects of the calculations. And then we said to them that if you pay this amount quickly, our policy holders, our claimants, are willing to accept terms. They'll take 50% upfront as a payment, and the balance can be paid off over 6 months to 2 years to 3 years, a period of your choosing, which would then give us the ability, or policyholders the ability, to pass that on to the financial institutions in the country, the banks and the government, as a means of trying to support and keep this tourism sector alive.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Suren, and thanks, Ryan. Are there any more questions, colleagues?
Sandra, if I may, it's Natalia.
Hi, Natalia, go ahead.
Chief, are you with us? Would you unmute? I've got a question for you.
Hi, I'm here.
How's it? Okay, so I'm interested in tourism as an apex industry. And you actually posted on your Facebook account about 2 days ago how tourism actually impacts other economic sectors and other industries. So could you perhaps just give us an understanding of what that impact is beyond tourism? Meg was so good about telling us about those suppliers that have stepped up and assisted her. But I also think it's key for people to understand that without tourism, there are a lot of other sectors that are impacted negatively.
Thank you, Natalia. I think one of the things which is a tragedy, and that I believe that government doesn't understand fully is how tourism impact other sectors that may not necessarily be called tourism. And when you talk about these businesses being impacted, this business is closing down, this business is not able to operate, it goes all the way back to, someone who's working in a farm, who produces those farm, produces, to feed the guests in those businesses. It goes all the way to car manufacturing, whereby we buy, as a tourism sector, we buy 12.5% of locally manufactured vehicles for car rentals. The buses that we, that are finished here in South Africa, and services from the banks and so forth and so on. So we impact many different aspects of other industry, construction, manufacturing of furniture, people who do curtains and other things that are decorative within these properties. You would have had the issues that will impact also by giving back, sustaining various schools or societies or community projects and many different things that are within our community. So I think that there's a lack of understanding in terms of when you devastate one business, there are many other people that are going to be devastated along the value chain. And we may not think of them as people that work within the tourism sector, but that delivery truck that comes and deliver in that hotel, is part of the value chain. The people that work there are part of the value chain. So the refusal to pay this insurance goes a long way back in devastating people that may not be working at those properties. So I think it's very important. And I think this has to go to government as well. It's very important that this insurance is claimed to be paid out. Because if they're not paid out, businesses will close. We now know that the UIF-TS program is coming to an end. It's not going to be extended. So there won't be any UIF for employees. There is no relief for business from these insurance companies. The travel between provinces is prohibited. So what do you expect us to do as a tourism sector? We can't just sit back and do nothing when every way of our business lives is being impacted across the board, and many other people that are within the value chain are being impacted. I think it's quite critical that the government comes into the space as well, and sit down with these insurance companies, be it the Minister of Finance, sit down with these insurance companies and talk to them. Let's understand why they're refusing to pay. And government must also be accountable, to this factor, because they are party to the institution of lockdown. They can clarify for these insurance companies. We are now in a situation where, we are being locked in a corner where employees won't get UIF-TS, business interruptions is not going to be paid out. Provinces they're not allowing us to travel within provinces, even for domestic leisure. The properties, if you look at Cathedral Peak, if we're allowed to open, at least for domestic leisure, you can get some people who wants to go on recreation or rest and relaxation to go and relax. But we don't have any of those luxuries from government to travel because we are locked down. But apparently other people can travel, and it's okay for business, but it's not okay for leisure. So we are in a situation whereby we are being put in a corner, and when you put us in a corner, something is bound to happen. And I must say that I'm starting to admire how the taxi association are dealing with these matters, because they're just getting on with the business. And when you put us in a corner and you give us the rules, that makes no sense. You're putting us in a corner where we may have to take some drastic decisions for survival purposes. Something has to give. Insurances must pay up. It's time for them to come to the table so that we can sustain the entire value chain of tourism. Interprovincial travel must be opened up. If we don't get those things and UIF-TS is closing down, then you're putting us in a corner. Something is bound to give. And it's not going to be a nice thing to do. We're a very compliant industry, and we've been doing things by the book. And now, the very same companies that we've been paying for years are the ones that are, really being unfair to our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm terribly sorry, Sandra. I thought the meeting was starting at 12 o'clock. It's Linda Ensor from Business Day. So I've come in at the very late stage. Can I just ask, is there going to be a court process or what? If you could just sum up the meeting for me.
Oh, shit.
I'm terribly sorry about this.
Don't worry, Linda. We'll actually send you a recording of this right after so that you'll have it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. I see that there's also, Natalia has also added some statistics on the impact of the value chain in the chat box. So you're more than welcome to use that as well, colleagues. Are there any further questions for our panelists this morning?
Yes, Londiwe, again from Finn. Just one follow-up question. You mentioned that the companies that have put in their policy wording that they don't cover pandemics only started doing so in the past 2 years. So I just want to get a sense of whether it is your view that policyholders who bought the cover prior to that exclusion should be paid. Thanks.
Just to be clear there, Londiwe, all the policy holders that we represent have got the contagious business interruption, the contingent business interruption cover for infectious and contagious notifiable disease. They do not have an exclusion in their policies whatsoever. So there is no exclusion. There are other insurers that do not have claims, and the reason why they don't have any claims is because they have got an epidemic pandemic exclusion. The insurer in South Africa is Infinity.
Ryan, isn't it also interesting to note that the insurers, many of the insurers have changed their policy wording to exclude the notifiable and infectious disease clauses from the 1st of June. Would that not imply by default that they believed that the claimants had a cause before?
It's definitely something that our legal team has looked at, and the defense that the insurers have raised is saying that they had to put that in at the request of their reinsurers. But if you read what that exclusion says, it's exactly what we believe the cover is there for. And we think that they've scored an own goal, but at the same time, that'll be something that gets developed in the legal process. But they are still just sticking to their guns. I think just one other thing to raise from my side is these policies are obviously contracts, and with contracts there can be some sticky terms, and as we found out. And some of them are prescription related, so time bars. And those are that you need to submit your claim within a 30-day period of the expiry of your interruption period. So in other words, if you've got cover for 3 months, you need to submit particulars of your claim within 30 days of the expiry of that 3-month period. If you don't do that, potentially your policy and will be null and void, and they won't pay your claim. The other is that if you've received a rejection or a repudiation of a claim or unsatisfactory assessment of the loss, you've got 90 days within which to write and provide written objection to that repudiation, rejection, or adjustment. If you don't do that, your claim falls away. The other requirements, like for HRC, they've got a 6-month period that from the date of rejection, you have to institute legal proceedings or issue summons in order to interrupt prescription. So these are all time elements that are starting to tick because the insurers have been, quick to reject claims and to get their time bar processes underway. We've appealed to many of the insurers to relax these time bars and to provide extensions or moratoriums. So far, we are due to hear back quite soon from Hollard and from Santam, but the rest have been silent on it. So we would hope that they would, in these circumstances, agree to relax those terms.
Thanks, Ryan. I see that Serena's got another question. Go ahead, Serena.
Hi, Ryan, just in terms of the reinsurers, obviously we can check it up, but who are some of the big reinsurers that are affected? Obviously, you're not interacting with them directly, but surely if Chifiwa is calling for government to get involved, then there should be some sort of interaction with the reinsurance, maybe from a higher level.
I couldn't agree with you more, Suren. There's a part of me that feels that these foreign entities are holding the country to ransom, or at least the sector of the country to ransom. Our insurers just don't have the courage to stand up to them if that is in fact the case. The reinsurers would be any of the major players, Munich Re, Swiss Re, and the list would go on. Africa Re, I think, are one as well. We'd need to check with the regulator. We're not privy to those contracts. They actually mean little in our course, but obviously it would help if the regulator and if government stepped in and had the conversation with them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Suren. So I think that we're conscious of the time and that we've gone 9 minutes over, but I just wanted to thank every one of our panelists today for this very enlightening but also very emotional discussion that we had today. I think it is an important discussion to have. And to the media, I would just want to say thank you so much for supporting this cause. Many of you have been writing about this issue for some time now. So just want to say thank you very much to all of you, and please reach out to Danny and I if you need anything at all, including access to our speakers today, any background information, or if you need any interviews with any of our speakers. Thank you so much, everybody.
And can I just add something, Sans?
Yeah.
I've got the email addresses of all of you, and we will send a link to the recording as soon as we've downloaded it. And please feel free to share that as widely as you want to. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.